Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get this shit started. Thank you everybody for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. Hope you all enjoyed our previous episode with the third appearance of Mr. Larry Hankin. All the characters you know him as. Get the book. Get the goddamn book. We've put it on this podcast 3 times now. You know it's good. I don't like to read. But we're back today with another familiar guest. And if you've been listening from the very beginning, then this name probably sounds a little familiar, right? I think it was like episode number 6 or something like that. Something in the very, very beginning. So I want to welcome back to the podcast now for the second time, Mr. Bao Lam. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, man. I see you're wearing that Yang shirt. What does that say? It says Yang 2020. It's a little past 2020, but
that's true.
I'm glad you still, you still believe in Yang there. Do you still believe in Yang?
I believe in some of his principles. Yeah. I've grown a lot past the UBI stuff, but some of his, bright ideas, refreshing. I kind of like that. Mm-hmm. And that's where I kind of come from. I like to, think about those more than the other type of politics.
Yeah, man. I don't like this whole, and I don't know if we really touched on it back then because it was just kind of getting there, I think. But it's so damn personal. Politics is so personal, man. Like it's like fucking picking your favorite religion or football team.
Yeah, it's all that combined and worse.
Mm-hmm. And people just attack each other over that shit. You're right. With somebody like Yang, it wasn't like, fuck you, man. Like, I'm all about Yang. It was just more like, oh, I like his ideas,
Yeah, that's one thing that drew me to his campaign. It was just like, here's some ideas. I'm not going to make enemies of anybody else. As a matter of fact, I'll go over to like the other side and sit down and have a conversation with them. And I really appreciated that. Mm-hmm. Because if anybody knew anything, right? Like if you had like a conversation with somebody from the other side, you realize they're just a normal human being, and you guys might even share a lot of overlapping values. Who knows? Yeah. Sit down, talk.
Well, we're not here to talk about Yang. We talked about that last time a bit, right? Even the episode was entitled Yang Gang Related. I thought that was kind of clever. But since you were one of the first guests on when we're just kind of exploring this whole concept, right? I always follow up with people when it's their second time. Mm-hmm. How was that whole little experience, man?
It was good. We didn't really make it too far. I mean, we made it fairly far. So I'm happy about that. People are aware of his ideas. People are aware of there's a different side of politics. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, well, Bao, I mean, how was the experience of you being a pseudo Z-list celebrity being on this podcast?
Oh yeah. It's I try to keep it in when I get recognized in the street. Yeah. It's all good.
They're like, hey, that's that guy, the Yang Gang related guy.
Yeah.
Pretty soon you'll be promoting a book on here like Larry Hankin, right?
That's right.
Yeah. But have you listened to any of the episodes ever since?
I haven't had a chance. I caught a little bit of the what is it? I always get the two mix, like Cheech or Chong.
Tommy Chong.
Tommy.
Yeah. He's got some out there life philosophies, man.
Oh, he's great. He's like everybody's, beloved grandfather at this point.
Everybody's beloved grandpa that gets high, right?
Yep.
But yeah, man, before we started, you were checking in like, hey, how's it going with the podcast and everything like that, right? You asked me a question, right? If I'm doing this like full time.
Yep.
I don't know how people do it full time, man. Like unless you're like one of the big ones, like Joe Rogan or something like that, and you already had a following somehow. Like, I don't know, dude, because like there are so many podcasters, and I don't have like a gigantic following. I don't, and that's not really my goal, to be honest with you. I mean, people listen, they listen. I don't care. I'm having fun with it, Mm-hmm. But I've talked to a bunch of other podcasters on here too, and have asked them like, hey, is this kind of your full time thing, or do you work and do this? And they're making it their full time thing. Then I go and check out their YouTube or their Facebook or Instagram, like, oh, you got like 200 followers. Like, well, how the hell are you doing this full time? You know, and they're talking about trying to get sponsors and, doing Patreon and shit like that. I'm like, well, who's gonna buy the Patreon? You know, like your mom, like your little brother. You know what I'm saying, man?
Yeah, I mean, he has an entire team, and he's at a point where he can choose his sponsors.
Uh-huh.
And like the rest of us probably don't have that luxury of like choosing who to put on here.
Yeah. So yeah, to answer your question from before we started recording, no, it is not full time at all. This is something that is a hobby. I record on the weekends, and I have fun doing it. Right. I get to catch up with people like the illustrious Bao Lam. Right.
And we appreciate it.
So, I'm glad you wanted to, kind of come back on and chat because the whole purpose of starting this podcast for me was not just having fun, having conversations, but let me learn some shit, right? Let me talk about some things that I don't know about, pick other people's brains who have a better handle or understanding of things. And you reached out to me, you wanted to talk to me about something very specific, which is, well, how do I even put it? Like cryptocurrency, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I really wanted to share and chat about like ideas of like the principles of cryptocurrency, blockchain, and how it fits into the future. Because being a futurist, a hobbyist, right? I find these things the most inspiring when I wake up in the day, and they could have quite a bit of impact in the future of everybody's well-being. And this is like one of these revolutionary stuff right next to like artificial intelligence and like green energy. I think these are like part of the discussion.
Yeah, last time we talked a little about nuclear energy and whatnot, and that was to me was really interesting. I didn't know anything about it, but it's kind of in the same realm, at least in my brain, because I don't know shit about crypto. I've heard the term. I hear people talk about it, and sometimes too. Look, and this is where I get concerned. Why, you're a smart guy, and I know you know what you're talking about, right? But I hear some of the dumbest people talking about this stuff like they know about it, and they're just wasting their money. They're just throwing their money out there, and I am my baseline of understanding of this is pretty much near zero, right? I understand that it's not tied to any U.S. banks or anything like that, but I have a pretty much like almost flatline understanding of this. So why don't you give me like the dummies version, right? Like give me the dummies version because there's people out there like me who probably don't understand, right? Explain to me what exactly it is.
Sure. If you look throughout history, right, like currency represents a lot of things, and there's like a huge spectrum of what it is. And on the far end, you see things like gold. Something that represents like it's very scarce, so it holds its value very well. So it's been preserved. There's been wars that have been started over gold, right, throughout history, and that's the oldest form of money. Well, other than like the shells and whatever the rocks that perhaps they carved out before, and then the other end, you have your fiat money, which are just government issued money, government promises, right, and that's like doesn't have any inherent value with it. Neither does gold, but this has even less inherent value. And that's like the spectrum of what money is. And crypto kind of comes in and reinvents the entire thing. It adds a different type of digital element to it. So it does a lot of really interesting things. And currency might be a misnomer too, because currency might not actually be what it is. Like for instance, if you have like the spectrum of cryptocurrency, you have something called Bitcoin, right? It's been here since 2009. You've heard of that? Yeah, 2009, and it was kind of created into a response of the 2008 financial collapse of like certain markets. So cryptocurrency is just a digital form of currency, but it also provides a trustless system for you to send money, and it's programmable. So those aspects makes it different than traditional money, right? So just like we have dollars and we have gold, cryptocurrency has also a range. You have Bitcoin, and then you also have, the more programmable digital stuff that we can definitely get into. Did I answer your question, or did I leave anything out?
No, for sure. Like that's getting to to the point of it, and I'm understanding a little bit more.
Yeah.
I guess my question has always been like, well, where does it come from then? Like how does this have any value at all? So how are people able to say like, well, this turns into X amount, right? Because the value is always changing as well. I mean, I get it, as is our dollar, but it's not as like volatile, I would say, right?
Yeah, no, let's go over the fundamentals right now. Like, what is the property of money? So there's like 5 key points of what makes money money. One is fungibility, meaning if I take a dollar bill and I swap it for another dollar bill, it should behave exactly the same, right? So that it's like equal, so that people can exchange it easier, right? It needs to be portable, right? It needs to be able to move. It needs to be recognized by everybody to be actually accepted. And like the point that you mentioned, needs to be stable. How are you going to spend something that is $2 yesterday, $1 today, and 50 cents the next day? You can't really spend it, because maybe you think about holding it, and you can't even accept money like that. Well, what if the money you're accepting goes down by 50% the next day? Then it would be a bad day for you,
right?
And something needs to be a store of value, something that you can like hold on to and be okay. So those are properties of money, and definitely because cryptocurrency, that terminology came out a little bit early before people started realizing what it actually is. So it's maybe the word crypto asset might be a little bit more appropriate, but we'll just call it cryptocurrency for the sake of this conversation. It's not stable, at least the basic ones aren't stable, and I don't think you would be able to call it a cryptocurrency.
Now, would you say that it would necessarily like replace what we use now as money, or is it something in addition to? Because that's kind of always been on my mind. Like, well, is this something that we're just gonna like adopt and say like, well, we don't need our dollars anymore, or is it something that's just gonna be like, hey, I have my regular money and I have this?
Yeah, if you look at any type of like adoption of this type of technology that kind of replaces an old relic system, you would see that there is a period of coexistence between the two, right? Maybe right now you're seeing Teslas on the road, right? And there's still conventional cars still around, right? So there's going to be a period of them mingling together, and then the market and the people will decide which one's better. And I think over a period of time there will be a natural push and pull, and then maybe electric cars, or maybe conventional cars would win out, or maybe they'll just coexist.
With that though, do you think our government needs to be 100% on board with it? I mean, I know people already like are investing and are making money off of this and whatnot, but like our government's not all in on this, so like in order for it to work, does our government have to be all in?
I definitely think so. I know there's a lot of people part of the crypto community that behave kind of like cultists, right? You know what I mean? Like, hey, man.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, dude, like, I don't know anything about this, but it's a little scary when people are just so, like you said, almost like a cult, right? Like they're like, hey, come join me, come join my side, like try this out,
It's really hard to reason with somebody who's made, hand over fist on Dogcoin. Like, hey man, I don't think it has a use case, or I don't think it has value, but this guy's made $25,000 on, some. Can I curse in this podcast?
I've been cursing since day one.
Some, made up shitcoin. I guess they're all like that in some ways, but yeah, it's kind of hard to reason with those folks, and it's because of the nature of investment is belief. If you have a stake in it, you're gonna preach to everybody, and I've seen people do that. I had an old roommate whose dad, who's like 70 something years old, is like a Bitcoin dude. And every time he goes to the dinner table and he has to talk about it because he's made so much money with it. And it makes everybody wants to jump on, but then by the time like people jump on, it'll start crashing like it did.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
yeah, it kind of reminds me of like some of those multi-level marketers out there, right? That are selling you all of these goods in your head, right? They're trying to make you seem like my shit's so crazily good. Like you're going to want to do this. You're stupid if you don't. Like, come on, what's the big deal? Just take a chance, give me your $500 startup fee, things like that. It kind of reminds me of that mindset, the people that are really, really fanatics about this.
Yeah, I mean, and this is nothing to knock on anybody who's like lost money or anything. Like even the smartest people in the world get scammed, right? Like Isaac Newton, in the scientific field, he's one of the most brilliant minds of his time. He invented calculus. Like this guy is, premier, and towards the end of his life, he lost, everything towards a scam. So we're all susceptible to it, right? If the scam comes packaged in the way that we believe it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I can like describe for your audience like the fundamentals of like how it's structured, maybe you can kind of see the value. Because like you said, like it's like a Ponzi scheme in a way, right? The people who jump in first, gets the price at a low, and then like people start adding more to it, and then the price goes up, and you see how somebody would then cash out. Right. So what would cause it to shift away from a Ponzi scheme structures if you add use cases to it? Now people have a reason to hold onto it and use it in a different way. Right. So you can imagine like stuff that we need in the world, like commodities. And just to update your audience on my history. So I was in the Navy for a while. And I worked in the submarine force as a nuclear operator. And then Fabian and I did that podcast when I was going through college. And I graduated. And now I'm in Austin, Texas, working in fintech. But like the structure of it is, if you imagine a world where commodities exist, like trees, like lumber, or like metal, but you never use it. Like you can't use it. You have trees and lumber, right? And then you have metal, you don't use it. And the price of it just goes up and down, but there's like no use case for it. You see how like it's a scam in that case. There's like a Ponzi scheme and people dump the price up and down when there's no clear uses. So I believe in the future, cryptocurrencies are going to fall into two camps. Yeah, they're going to fall into like Bitcoin, this camp, and Bitcoin tries to simulate gold. It's simulating digital gold. It has a scarcity model similar to gold. And the only reason why gold is so valuable is the fact that the supply of gold is dwindling every year. So it has a constant deflationary model. Less and less gold enters the system every year. So that's how the price is controlled. The metal itself isn't really worth that much,
right?
To use. I mean, you can put it in electronics. It's probably in your PS5 that I know you have.
Xbox, but go ahead.
Oh yeah, Xbox. That was blasphemy of me. So they have that aspect to it. And that's how Bitcoin behaves. And it's not until we have use cases for it, because right now all it behaves is a store of value, but it's volatile as fuck. Yeah. Right? How are you supposed to, keep it if you're going to lose half your wealth? You can't. So it doesn't behave in that way. And maybe when it gets large enough, it will stabilize, but it's towards the end, beginning of its days. If you look at it like baseball, it's probably the first or second ending right now with Bitcoin. But then the other side you have is programmable money. And that's where like my niche is. That's where like my passion is, the programmable side of it. And I think there's a lot of cool stuff to it. If you imagine like a vending machine, right? You don't need to know what's happening in the vending machine. You just need to know if you push E5, those Reese's peanut butter cups are just going to fall down and you get to enjoy them, right?
Yeah, you mentioned my favorite at the Reese's. So now you got my attention.
Yeah, so this programmable side, I think is going to be one of the most useful things that have been created. And we can definitely dive into that in a second. But like how this technology works is that it's built on a blockchain. You've heard of that?
I've heard the phrase. Like, I don't know what it means. I heard the phrase.
Yeah. So right now, what app do you use the most? Netflix, something like that.
What app do I use? I mean,
Yeah.
probably something like, YouTube, Facebook, like Instagram to put my podcast up and shit like that. So yeah.
Yeah, so right now your app on your YouTube on your phone, right? It's just like the front end of the software. It's just like the boxes where things should be. That's the code. And then maybe your account is actually hidden behind servers in the back so that if anybody looks into your phone right now, they won't be able to directly pull your information, which is safe. It's nice. And it takes a lot of the load off your phone, which is nice. So a lot of that information is stored on servers that are centralized, right? So YouTube is owned by Google. And the issue is, do we know Google's going to be here in 20 years?
I mean, just an assumption we can assume probably, yeah, but
Yeah, but we know the AI is just over the corner, right? So maybe one of those companies might take over and beat Google at their own game, quite possibly. So there's a lot of the internet infrastructure, and you and I went to high school together, right? We grew up in the MySpace days.
Oh yeah, greatest social media, by the way.
Right, no arguments, just music and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, if you go back to your MySpace right now, I got an email a few years ago saying, "Hey, if you want your shit, get it now, or else we're gonna wipe it clean." Right. So that just tells you in MySpace, I was in it. That was like 2006, 2007 was. And
yeah, it was created in 2004. I don't think it got popular until about 2006, 2007. Yeah.
Yeah, my junior and senior year. And it's almost 20 years later and they're pretty much off the map.
Yeah.
So if we expand that to like 40, 50 years, a lot of these centralized companies might not be here in the future. So blockchain provides this infrastructure for you to have longevity where you can kind of write onto and keep data on there so that you're able to preserve stuff over a long period of time. And instead of having a single like Google server holding your YouTube data and your search history or whatever, right, that information, you're able to write some of that information, the key points, onto a blockchain, which is just a block of information that's written every so often. With Bitcoin's like every 10 minutes, and with Ethereum it's every couple minutes or so. Excuse me. So that it's not the most efficient way to store information. You create blocks, and not only do you create blocks, but you create a fingerprint of the block before it. So block B has the fingerprint of block B plus block A. And then the next block has its fingerprint plus the previous box. So if you do anything and alter it, you end up disrupting the entire chain because the fingerprints are all like connected to each other. So that's how it's secure. So that's called a ledger. And a ledger is just between you and I. Hey, Fabian, I'm going to send you 2 Bitcoin. I have 2 less, you have 2 more. And the ledger writes that down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it writes it down. And what it does is it provides a means for us to audit later. And not only that, the network of computers, because the internet is just a bunch of computers connected together. And they kind of audit each other. They audit each other so that if there's any bad actors writing the wrong piece of information, they'll kick them out of the network. So now you have a network that has a like immune system to fight off bad actors. And they're writing into a ledger that's unmutable is the terminology, but you can't really change it once it's written. Because if you change that, depending how long the chain is, you might need to break the entire chain, which might take, millions of years.
Yeesh.
So it's using cryptography's ability to make it such that it's easy to go one way, but really hard to go the other way. It's using that aspect of cryptography to secure the chain, and that's what it is, man. It's just a list that people write down who owns what, and you're able to do a lot of cool stuff with it.
I felt like I was in an episode of Silicon Valley right now. You ever used to watch that show?
Yeah, I've seen a couple episodes.
Yeah, with the company Pied Piper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, this is very Silicon Valley right now. So
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like the language is kind of clear, but like I know for most people who aren't in the industry, yeah. So feel free to poke at it
for sure. No, I mean the way you explain it makes sense. You know, it's just I've never had a want to learn any of this, so like you know when you explain it, it does make sense. I want to real quick just before we get into you know the programmable side that you know you wanted to talk about. Just real quick, so with something you know like crypto, because you know we talked about it being volatile. Haven't people already like lost money on some of these things like big time, right? Haven't there been like these big, you know, like hey, pull your money out now because this shit's going south, right? Didn't that happen recently with like one of the big players or no?
Yeah. I mean, there's a website called Wrecked, and it's a post-mortem of like all the shit that blew up. And reading through it is so depressing, bro. It's like, hey, you know, January 9th, 2022, $60 million was wiped off the earth, and this is what happened. Like it's a new industry, and nobody, it's like, just imagine a field full of landmines. We know the salvation's on the other side, but nobody knows exactly where the direction is and where the mines are. So a lot of these companies are just going in, and you know, a lot of companies are kind of waiting for these other projects to kind of step on the mines for them and like walk around behind.
What causes that though? Like why does that happen? Why would something, you know, all of a sudden just kind of like, you know, blow up in the landmine?
Yeah, I mean, for one, things don't always go up. I mean, if you talk to one of those you know, cultists, I used to be a cultist, I can say that, but yeah, like when you talk to one of those folks, you realize like their idea is money goes up. You know, I put money in, money goes up. But the fact is things go up and down because at any moment there's people willing to buy and willing to sell. So the price of anything is the price people are willing to sell and buy it. That's how the job market or any market is determined. So if they're at any moment, people are like, I don't want to buy it. Well, the seller has to lower the price until somebody buys it. And that creates the fluctuations up and down.
It's kind of like how when people were, you know, getting into those stock market apps and stuff like that, man, like like Robinhood or whatever, like shit was just going crazy for a bit, right?
GameStop?
Yeah. Reddit really had something to do with it, you know, and it's kind of crazy because like I'm like, fuck, all of this shit is make believe, man. Like, you know, money is so make believe, you know, but it has such a hold on us.
Yeah, I mean, you and I, we were going to high school together, like I said earlier, and then you know that's to prime us for the real world, right? Making money out here,
in theory,
supposedly. Yeah, so we're supposed to, you know, go into this world already from the day we were born to start working and getting this thing, money. And you know, we're both millennials, right? And like, you know, they're about to raise the retirement age for like full benefits, I think, on us, which kind of sucks. But like, yeah, you end up working your entire life for this, like you said, make believe stuff, right? Because you have food and family to support and rent to pay and bills to pay. Like it's kind of an interesting system. And that's another part of that I wanted to speak about is like, you know, we both grew up in Los Angeles. And then we experienced, you know, both we came from kind of similar social economic status, right? And we saw poverty from our side. and it's usually, both parents working, and like the kids kind of like we all kind of raise each other, the
Yep.
community, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then both maybe grandma or grandpa is at home, but they're kind of like doing their own thing, unaware, typically. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like if you look at this, man, like most people gain money just from their income,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
If you want to make more money, you have to work more. That's
Mm-hmm.
typically what it is. It's been, yeah. And I think the one of the things I'm tackling right now is how do I use cryptocurrency and its programmable side to actually help us combat some of this poverty issue, because the sparing of the wealth between the wealth gap between the rich and the poor, that's been widening for some years now, right?
Yeah.
The middle class is kind of failing and they're getting pulled apart up and down.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
what middle
people.
class sometimes, right?
Yeah, yeah. I bet if you go to El Monte right now and split it, can you split it down the middle?
I think yeah, it's pretty much like those that own property and those that are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, I bought a house in Pomona, so I'm like, phew, I got something, to
Nice.
at least fall back on. As long as I keep all my shit, current, and my payments and everything, I'm good. Yeah, but if I were still like in Almani and shit, yeah, I'd pretty much be one of those, those have-nots, right? Because it's too fucking expensive.
Yeah,
Like,
California, even Austin right now, man. Like it's getting pricey. I joked on Facebook. I was like, man, I used to complain when it was like $15 for lunch. Now it's like $20.
you cannot find a $15 lunch out there, man. You're not even at the fast food places anymore.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, man. It's money's made up, but the economics behind it is not made up.
Mm.
There's quite a bit of reasons why the money is kind of doing that, behaving that way right now, and that's something also cryptocurrency will, I think, address as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it turns out that when you're a rich country like us, you can borrow more money, right? You have like a good credit score and you can borrow more money than somebody with a lower credit score, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is the beginning of the problem, right? So a country like, we'll say India, right? India has a huge workforce, they have a huge population, but they don't have a high credit score.
Right. Yeah.
So their debt to income ratio is very low.
Mm-hmm.
But then the United States, who makes a lot of money, who can borrow a lot of money and have been,
Mm-hmm.
they have a high debt to income ratio, as just like all the European countries as well. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a privilege, but it's when you invest money and the money doesn't bring bearing fruit the way that you expected it to. Now you lost money on it, right?
Right.
So not all investments are guaranteed to bear fruits. So
Mm-hmm.
you can imagine a lot of short-sighted politicians, thinking about the voting cycle, borrow money and use money to kind of accomplish short-term ideas. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the key stuff, and kind of the fallback of democracy in general is that we have representative democracy. We have people there for like, the president sits there for what, 4 years at a time
Mm-hmm.
if everything works out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's only worried. He has a 4-year plan to really worry about, and maybe planning for the future is a luxury beyond
Mm-hmm.
that. So you have a bunch of short-sightedness. You really, people are spending to apply first aid and do things immediately instead of like long-term planning,
Mm-hmm.
and that is causing the debt cycles to grow quite a bit. And the debt cycles are one of the things that are creating the the currency deflation as well as the other stuff, or inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because when your loans are denominated in the currency that you create, like I'm the United States, I want to borrow American dollars.
Mm-hmm.
You actually have the luxury of printing money to pay back those loans.
Mm-hmm.
And usually the other ways to take care of that loan, they don't end up doing because it's more painful than printing money. So printing money ends up being the quick remedy, quick fix because they're playing hot potato. They're passing it on to the next person behind them. And then next thing you know, the debt is $32 trillion.
Yeah, it hurts.
Do you know how long a billion seconds is?
I mean, I'm not going to do the math, so why don't you go ahead and tell me, Bao?
Yeah. So a billion seconds is 32 years. Whew. So I just made 32 years. But a trillion seconds, it just gives you the size of the number, is 32,000 years.
Eesh.
So that's the size of the number. And this is, in Eastern culture, we call it a gray rhino. You know, Western culture, they have something called a black swan.
Yeah.
Like things that come out of nowhere and pop your tires. Gray rhinos are a class of problems that are like people know it's there, but it's often ignored. So they grow into a larger and larger problem until it becomes massive. And that's the type of problem that we're dealing with right now. That is like nobody wants to touch the rhino in the room. But yeah, that's causing also the deflation of monies, the printing of money to service debt. So that plus the printing of money before to help with COVID relief and stimulate the economy in 2020.
Yeah.
So that brings up the point is that because human are corruptible, and because the system is like designed for short-sighted thinking and resolution, and oftentimes that takes money from the future, because debt is just borrowing money from the future. You're taking prosperity from the future, and that's what they're doing. They're taking money from the future to do something right now to help maybe their individual careers. Short-sightedness, and that's creating this failure in the money. And that could be addressed by creating a system on top of the blockchain where it doesn't matter who you are, you can't mess with the rules of the because that's a system we all use. If the economy drops, we see in Venezuela, Lebanon, like all these countries that failed, it's scary. Like you saw the news, right, with Venezuela. People were fleeing. People were like making trinkets and stuff with their money.
Yeah, that's. I wonder, like, to me, like, what would happen if we got to that point? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
because we're vicious. We're fucking vicious, Yeah, so I'm wondering what would happen if we got to that point, but I hope we never see that.
I do too, and maybe that's like one of the reasons I always like park my car for the night with like a full tank of gas. If anything happens, I could just like I don't have to wait for gas at the the station next door.
Yeah, because I mean, even just during the whole pandemic and everything, things weren't, I wouldn't say like in shambles, but we acted like they were. People were fucking shoving each other for a chance to wipe their ass. Like trying to buy the most toilet paper and shit like that. Clearing out the shelves, and old people couldn't buy their groceries and stuff like that. So
yeah, and the news of toilet paper made things worse.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh, by the way, I got a bidet, so I'm good.
Smart man.
Yeah, my ass is clean, and I'm feeling like a brand new man with that thing. But that's a different story. Big advocate for bidets, by the way.
I'm sold. I'm putting my order in.
But yeah, I mean, what you're talking about, like Venezuela and things like that, right? As far as like, failure, and do you see that the U.S. could possibly be headed in that direction?
It has a few choices for sure, and one of the choices definitely is, that hyperinflation oblivion. And I've seen the economics behind hyperinflation real time. We can definitely, get into that another time, but it's very scary because it starts off kind of slow, but like it picks up very fast. And at that point, like the government ends up locking everybody into the system. Like you can't move your money out of, the Venezuelan currency because the fact of you moving it out will increase the speed of the casualty. So people end up getting locked in, and then the currency starts dropping. And it kind of sucks too, because there's like the big government thing too, that they have a lot to do with the money. Like your dollar isn't very as secure as much as you think it is. Just like if you look at the Argentinian like case where like the banks overnight took all of the foreign currencies in the bank from everybody and then replaced it with pesos, like their peso. So they did that to service their debt because their debt was getting a little bit too high. So then the people, they didn't ask anybody. So
they just decided we're gonna do whatever the fuck we want.
Right. And like who knows what the value of the peso is going to be at that point, And that's why like a system on a blockchain prevents them from doing that. It keeps everybody honest.
Yeah, because I mean, if you walk into a bank right now and try to pull all your money out, like they're upset at you, right? They're like, they have questions for you. They're going to make you fill out all these forms. They're going to call some people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll have to like call them ahead of time too. Like we just had the case with like the Silicon Valley Bank, right? The bank run that happened there. Do you hear about that?
Yeah, it's affecting what major bank is. I mean, I know there's like people that might be laid off, right, and stuff like that. Because as a result, what is it? It's not Wells Fargo. It's one of the other banks, right?
The bank I'm talking about is Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah, but doesn't it have like other
like
banks under it or something like that?
I'm not aware. I know Silicon Valley Bank is like non-commercial. Like it's like just for certain clients.
I might be thinking about a different one then. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're falling down. And it's just because the system is so fragile because we're taking turns, governments and whoever are shaking the table, they're stabilizing it just because they're, catching themselves from falling. That's essentially what happens. And where I think we can kind of resolve a lot of these issues, because I think the world operates a lot better if we all had at least appropriate amount of money. Right? There's like a standard of living that we're kind of above. And even if the poorest people are above this line, I think society behaves a lot better. Sam Harris has like a quote where he describes, when does the system break, man? When you have trillionaires living in gated communities with like gun turrets and like giant walls, and like the rest of us out here like scraping in like giant mega ghettos. Like the system breaks because naturally money tends to clump up at the top. It just naturally does that. Like Amazon, we all use Amazon. We all can agree how valuable it could be but like money clumps up at Amazon. And that's just a natural phenomena. It just clumps up. So if you look at rich people, they have a lot of cool ways to make money. They have the ability to make money without working harder. And that's the core principle, I think, to solve poverty. Because right now, my mom, she cuts hair. She graduated beauty school, I think, a couple years ago. She's cutting hair right now. She wants to make twice as much money. She would have to work twice as many hours.
Yeah.
Because that's her premier and only way to make money. And it's kind of a bummer, but that's the case for a lot of us, right? And maybe some of us have retirement accounts. If your employer is grateful or you've been able to put money away. And that's one of the ways for us to not work until the day we die, is the fact that we're able to make money by putting away money in that regard. It's one of the crown jewels of capitalism, actually, is that the fact that you're able to make money without working, at least till you die. And how the rich people do that is with equity. Right. They own pieces of shit. We live in a country right now where most people rent, bro. Like it's, if you're right. So you're paying to somebody else's equity. And until we can change that, until we can create a system where people own stuff,
Mhm.
we won't be able to address that issue. So maybe we won't be able to get rid of poverty because there's always going to be somebody at the bottom, right?
Mhm.
If we could create the despair between the top and the bottom, they call it relative poverty.
Mhm.
If we can contract that, then I think the system will work a lot better.
Hmm.
Even if your life is good, like you're like living in a really nice life, but like the people next to you, they're not doing well, then you're not doing well either. Just
Mhm.
because the way you guys rub up on each other in life.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
you're
it's
right.
good to take care of everybody in that regard.
Mhm. And is that something addressed by like cryptocurrency and stuff?
Sure. So cryptocurrency behaves in a lot of different ways. It could behave like gold, but then it could also behave like a stock, which is partial ownership of the company, right? You're entitled to certain proceeds from the company. So
Mhm.
it can behave in that way. And also it could behave like fuel,
Mhm.
like gasoline or like metal to be used and consumed. So those are the three aspects: store of value like gold. It could be used, um, yeah, to be consumed into the blockchain like as fuel.
Mhm.
And yeah, you can program it.
Mhm.
So the reason why it's like that is because we talked about the immune system, right, of the blockchain, how it's like self-governed and policed.
Right.
Um, in order, that's not a free process. It requires you to give them a mining fee, like a fee for them to write on the blockchain and guard it for you.
Mhm.
So that's the first system. Those guys right there are able to protect the system and they get paid. And you've heard of them, miners? You've heard of the crypto miners?
Yeah, I that I didn't understand either, but now, yeah, you're making sense of it a little. But go ahead, yeah, explain that a little.
Yeah, so crypto miners, and they, if anybody builds computers or plays computer games, you probably know that that community has been driving the price up of all the video cards for everybody's gaming PC. And that's because like that type of hardware does solves like a particular problem very well that cryptocurrency is used for cryptography. And it's essentially like guessing numbers.
Mhm.
And that's how they use like cryptography to kind of secure the network. So those guys use their computer hardware, all those video cards and whatnot. They use that to solve very hard problems for the right to write onto the blockchain.
Mm.
So that's called proof of work. And it takes electricity to do that. So can everybody do that? No. You need to have like hardware to compete and do that. And then when somebody writes onto it, everybody verifies that it's correct.
Mm.
And that's extremely powerful because it takes about a 51% majority of the computers to agree something happened. So for you to compromise the system, if you want to hack into it, you want to give yourself Bitcoins, you need to overwhelm greater than 50% of the computers there.
Mm.
And at this point, the Bitcoin network is probably larger than most countries.
Oh.
So that's the security. And we talked about thousands of years or 50 years. That's the infrastructure for storing digital gold over thousands of years.
Mhm.
You need to have a system that is self-governed, decentralized. No company or no government can mess with it and alter it. Because for Google to kind of overwhelm the Bitcoin network, it's impossible. They don't have enough hardware.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, something really ideal. Like, hey, it's gonna take care of itself. You know, nobody's gonna be able to just, be like, I'm taking this over, or I'm making it mine, and I'm gonna make it work for just me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why when do you see this, like, becoming like a bigger thing? When are we gonna start, seeing cryptocurrency be like the currency, right? Is that, you think that's coming in the near future, or it's gonna take, a long time, or is it gonna happen at all?
Yeah, the winners aren't clear right now. It feels like who we're trying to pick the Amazon like in the 1990s.
Mm.
There's a lot of .coms who's going to make it. It's very hard to tell.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, it's just because like I'm like, well, what's the difference between Bitcoin and this other guy?
Yeah. Yeah. What's the difference between shitcoin and poopcoin? I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So the future is unclear. We don't even know if Bitcoin's gonna be the winner, but it seems to be the one that's winning right now. And I'm not quite sure who's gonna win in that realm, or if it's gonna replace currency because it doesn't really behave in that way to replace it, right? That's like trying to go to the store and buying like ice cream with Bitcoin. It's like almost going to the store buying ice cream with gold. Like it doesn't seem the model doesn't work. Um, yeah, I know that right now when they created the internet, they didn't create money, a currency for the internet. So I think that's where cryptocurrency kind of comes in. It's going to be like a currency for the internet.
Now, and let me see if you can answer this, Bao. So, we heard a lot of good stuff, right? You mentioned a lot of good stuff. Now, what are some of the things that people are saying out there that could really like be seen as like the negative side of like crypto? We've already heard it's kind of volatile, things like that. But I've heard people say like, well, this is funding or it's making it easier for like terrorists to buy and sell things, or fucking pedophiles and things like that, right? What are some of the downfalls potentially?
Yeah, those are all fair criticisms, honestly. I mean, the first time I've heard about Bitcoin, it was tied to like the dark markets on the internet, on the news and stuff. I was like, first of all, I didn't know about Bitcoin and I didn't know about dark markets on the internet, but I will Google and find out. And then yeah. But like, yeah, there's a lot of fair criticism. Maybe that's like a network for terrorist groups to like exchange money. And so is the dark web to exchange and talk. But one of the most premier criticism is the environment. You've heard of that argument?
Yeah. That it's going to take too
Yep.
much energy and things like that, right?
Yeah, in our previous example of like the way they agreed to write something on the blockchain, the immune system, that requires an exorbitant amount of money. If you need more than half of the computers to agree on something, that's a lot of money or a lot of energy. Yeah, if you take the Bitcoin network right now, I think it's like in the top 20 of power consumptions when compared with like countries. And the first question you got to ask yourself, is it worth it? And yeah, there is some cases, but maybe like you should examine more of like where the energy is coming from. If it's coming from like fossil fuel, then maybe it's not worth it. Right. But if you're able to use, because the grid is not very efficient sometimes. Sometimes there's like energy trapped into the grid. So if you can make the grid more efficient by using redirecting trapped energy, like wind power, right? Like maybe sometimes it's spinning really heavy and then sometimes it's not. And there's like despairing. So maybe like be able to tap into that at different points or using clean energy like hydroelectric. Really depends on the fuel source, but to address that, if it's not a green future, then maybe it's not worth it. But a lot of the modern blockchains have they have more efficient ways to operate.
Okay. Yeah. So then there is some progress being made, and so it potentially wouldn't be as harmful to the environment.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a system called proof of stake, which is the premier method right now for the most blockchains. And instead of like having the majority of the computers kind of agree on an event happening, you could have one of those miners or validators picked randomly. and they have a stake, meaning they're letting the system hold like we'll say $100, and that's their ticket. You know, like when you're at the arcade and you put your quarter on top of the machine, and like it's like I'm next.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that. Like they just queue in with their quarter, and if they misbehave, if they try to like write something that didn't exist or didn't happen, their stake or that quarter will be yanked away. And that for the Ethereum network, which is the premier programmable smart money, that is about 32 ETHs, which ends up being, at least the time I checked, was like $60,000.
Wow.
So there's incentives for you to behave. But here's the utopian the picture that I see that I think I'm gonna try to tie it all together is that, you know, poverty is an issue that I think we need to address and take a closer look at in unique and novel ways, right? There's a lot of like stuff they're trying to do right now, I think, that are just kind of addressing the symptoms and not addressing the issues. The fact that America right now, we don't own a lot of stuff, right? A lot of people have, you know, paying car payments or education, right? That's expensive.
Oh, don't tell me. Yeah. Don't remind me. I mean, go on, Bao, before we go on another tangent. But yeah,
so things are getting more expensive, and there's not enough ways for us to make money. And the rich are able to safe haven their money and to be able to make money passively, right? And that's what we need. We need to, and you can do that with the smart money. You can create, like for this podcast, right? Instead of like going to the SEC and say, hey, I want to publicly open my podcast as a company so people can invest in. You know, you could create a token of cryptocurrency where it can behave like a Patreon. You mentioned that, right? Like, hey, if this podcast means anything to you, you know, you can become part owners of this podcast. You know, I'll give you this equity token, and this token allows you to, you know, whenever we do a live podcast, you know, if you ever do a live podcast, you know, you guys can get the tickets first. You guys can get the option to buy the tickets first. Not only that, but if you go to any of our stores or any of our partners, they have shirts, you know, merchandise to sell. You can go in and maybe get discounts on that, right? So it creates an economic incentive between you and your consumers that are unlike before, right? AMC theaters getting to showings of movies earlier, like premieres of showings, exclusive showtimes, discounts and concession stands, discount tickets, as well as it behaving like a stock of the company. So as you're investing into the company, they invest back into you. It creates a closer knit, and you become part owners of, you know, the Ignorance is Strength podcast, or the, you know, that becomes an economy where we're able to invest into each other. And I think that's the first step into resolving a lot of this poverty issues. Get people invested, even if you can't afford a house, because that's like a large thing to buy. But a slice of this podcast or a slice of like AMC theater is more manageable.
So that it's making your money work for you, and that'll essentially, you know, eliminate the need to have to double, triple your work, right? If all is done correctly and things like that, right? So I want to make sure that, you know, we throw out there, it's not like a get rich quick type of scheme, right? It's not something like that where it's just like, hey, you know, throw your money here and guess what? It'll grow, right?
And that's where the government comes in, honestly, is that's why we need the government to be able to kind of come in and audit the system and keep everybody honest.
Yeah.
You know, like right now, right? A lot of US banks are FDIC insured, right? We're insured up to
10,000, right?
Oh, it's like $250,000 per account.
Is it? Yeah, maybe I'm behind. I don't know why it used to be like, I used to think 10,000 or maybe like 100,000 or something like that, but it's 250,000.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So that maybe the numbers bumped up over the years, but that's not a free thing, right? That means the government is able to audit the bank at any moment. We're going to insure your stuff to protect your people, but then we're going to audit you at the same time. So making sure you're not going to take the money or do some shady stuff. And it keeps everybody honest, and it's a better system because now you want to put money into your bank and be okay at least up to $250,000.
Mm-hmm.
So the government plays an important role, and all those cultists, like they're a little bit too, they're like a decentralized future entirely, which we're far from.
Mm-hmm.
No governments, like just Bitcoin runs the world, and I don't want to be a part of that future.
I think something that kind of like throws a lot of people off, like me, who don't know much about this, right? And when you hear about new things like this, like you start to bunch them up with other things, right? And to me, I hear like Bitcoin, and it starts, it's in the same conversation a lot of the time, in the same space in my head where people throw things out there like NFTs, right? Like that stuff. See, to me, I don't know much about Bitcoin, but I understand that there's some value to it because, hey, okay, some people are, actually making money off of this, right? Even though there's those times where maybe it's too volatile and people are losing a lot of money, it's still, there's still some value. I see things like NFTs, right? And I'm like, all right, every fucking scammer in the business is jumping on this, right? When you got fucking Donald Trump out there selling his Pokemon cards, right? Where he's like a fucking astronaut and he's Rocky. I'm like, this shit isn't real. This doesn't, how the fuck does this make any money, right? How is this an investment? And I kind of looked at cryptocurrency a lot like that too, because I'm like, well, who's behind this? Like, who created this? Like, where is the money coming from? Like, why should I trust this? I think that's a lot of people, a lot of people's hesitation to really jump into something like that. You know what I mean?
No, that's absolutely fair. Yeah. I brought up the 90s before, but like the .com era is a very close parallel to this, isn't it?
Mm.
Like you and I grew up in the early internet, like before the
Yeah.
commercial internet.
Yeah, for sure.
Like before this place turned into a strip mall. Like this was AOL.
Where it took like a whole day to download a titty. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it usually stops halfway, right? You have to re-download it. Yeah, like during that era in the 90s, there was a lot of BS, bro, wasn't there? Mm-hmm. Like if there was anything with a .com next to it, it was getting pumped up. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to reason with people, just like it's really hard to reason with people making money on Dogecoin. It's like it's when people are making money hand over fist, there's a fog of war that you can't see very clear in the moment. But it's easy to look back and look at the data and be like, yeah, that was a bad idea. And that's the way it is now. There was a trend. And NFTs are just, instead of having like Bitcoin being written on the blockchain, it's a unique token that correlates to something. So maybe monkeys or apes aren't the best way to represent and use that technology. Like an ape thing, an ape NFT. But some things that you can use to represent it is identity, like who you are on the blockchain. And that gives you access. Maybe if you have an NFT representing like your driver's license, that gives you access to something on this new type of blockchain internet. We talked about the security on the blockchain, right? Like how it's like secure. That means you can keep things out in the open and people can't hack into it unless they hack the entire network. So you're able to keep stuff like medical records, credentials, these stuff on the blockchain, on the open internet, because nobody has the keys to access it. And only you with that, ID token are able to access it. And that's very powerful. Like if you're in Morocco somewhere on the beach and then you slip and fall and hit your head, and you rush to the hospital, if you have that token on you in some way, maybe your thumbprint or like your necklace or something, you're able to go in and access your medical records, even if you're unconscious, right? And they know exactly your history, so they know how to treat you. That's one of the use cases of NFTs. You have a house now. Another use case is creating smart deeds and wills. When you bought your house, maybe or maybe not, like the documentation of the house, right? Depending on how old the house is, like, what happened like 10 years ago, what happened 5 years ago, like. Maybe you can attach information on like, here's the electric schematic. Maybe you want to work on that one day, right? Here's the plumbing diagram. Here's the renovations we did on the bathroom like 2 years ago. Here's what got replaced. Stuff that is beneficial to a car owner or a house owner, right? smart information attached to a deed or a will. That's where the NFT stuff really shines. Not like $1 million apes.
Or fucking Donald Trump as Rocky Balboa. That's when I'm like, I don't take this shit seriously, man.
And it comes back to the equity things too. Like, suppose you took time out of your day to, or time out of your life to build a house. Maybe you can create a smart contract to handle that NFT for you so that you're able to get a slice of every time the house gets sold, royalties for just building it, or any intellectual property, this podcast. Maybe you decide to sell this podcast eventually to somebody larger, a larger network, and then you're able to you can program the money so that you can get passive income from it, which is very important to not working more.
Yeah, that's the name of the game right there, right? How do you get that passive income? I've heard that a lot of people, again, sometimes for good, sometimes not so good, right? I've heard a lot of fucking multi-level marketers try to use that, and it's like, it sounds great, but really you're not making shit, right? So hopefully, this is a good way to really tap into that passive income and to actually, make some decent, money. We'll see, right?
That's right.
It's real funny. You mentioned security and how secure it is. I was watching a sitcom. I think it was one of the new ones, like what's it called? Like American Auto or something. Yeah. And one of the characters on there has, all of his wealth tied into crypto, right? And he couldn't get in. He tried to get in. He couldn't remember his password. And apparently, like, if you guess wrong 10 times, you're locked out forever. Is it that secure? God. Is it that secure? Like where you could lock yourself out of your fucking fortune there?
Yeah, that's kind of a nightmare story, huh? But it's something that I've heard as well. And yeah, I mean that's very well the case. The power of that, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You're able to hold money. Like imagine like you have a bank holding your money, but you had full control of the money at any moment. So like a wallet provides you with banking, which is where you keep all the Bitcoin, all the coins. It provides you banking without having it in physical custody. And you have a password to it. And that password isn't like my name or whatever the password ends up being. Like it's a random string of like numbers and letters. Right. And because it's so secure, is like nobody can access it. If you lose that, you end up not being able to access it yourself if you're doing self custody. Now, there's a lot of companies that are doing custody for you, which is kind of nice. You don't have to worry about that. But then there's risk there as well. Like what happens if that company goes under? If they go bankrupt, which happened to some people that I know, the people who get their money back is usually the last people, the customers. Usually all the people that they owe money to get the money first, and everybody else gets the rest.
Yeah.
So there's risk there.
Yeah, because I was thinking like if you lock yourself out, like you can't just go and be like, okay, service team or IT team, help me out, right? Because who the fuck do you go to, right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah, it doesn't exist, right?
In a decentralized world, there's nobody to go to. If you send that money to the wrong wallet address, it's being sent out in cyberspace, out in nowhere. And that's one of the benefits too of keeping it into one of those centralized wallets, which are going to be like the crypto banks of the future, the centralized wallets. They have like you could avoid those type of things because when they send money, they kind of keep it for a while before they send it out. So you have some time to hit the eject button.
All right, cool. So what else you want to throw out there about the cryptos and poverty and or anything else at all? What else you want to throw out there? What should people know? What should people hear?
Yeah, I mean, poverty, it seems to be like one of those things that we hear about, but I believe like the lack of money, that becomes more of an issue. It kind of trickles out and becomes larger issues that Like a lot of the social problems I see in society, I think the root cause is money. If you look at like working a 9 to 5 job, you spend most of your life away from your friends, your family, doing the things that you love, right? Like I remember when you were in high school, you used to like play when you were like kicking people's ass on the mat, you were like, ripping on the guitar or like the drums, right?
Yeah.
Like you had a clear passion for music. And maybe like now because we're adults, we're working, and maybe we don't have enough time for the things we love, right?
No time, man. I wish. Yeah.
And the same is true for like seeing people that we love. A lot of the times like, hey man, I can't make it. I'm sorry. I got work, or you've got other engagements that are conflicting. Like if people had more time, and time is money. If you weren't using your time to make money and you're using it for other things, I believe you can heal a lot of the social despairs. We brought up politics in the beginning, right? We brought up the left and the right. I think these are just symptoms of people in an overworked country where people don't have leverage in the workplace. They're just working, and they're not seeing their friends and family. I don't even know who the fuck my neighbor is. But I just moved here, so that's on me. But like a lot of people like don't have the time because maybe they're at home and they're just recovering. They're just medicating from like working all day and stuff. They don't have time to go out and like shake hands with their neighbors, and when you have a society that's kind of being pulled away from each other in that regard, it provides a lot of room to like not really understand each other, the conversations that are being missed. And I think a lot of this political rhetoric are coming up because of it. It's like when you're not doing good, you're unhappy, all you see are like negative things. And when you are happy, you kind of overlook and maybe not pay attention to those things. So we're at a point where people aren't feeling good and all they are seeing are negative stuff, especially when you go on the internet, you go to the YouTube comment section, right? It's like, dude, I didn't say that.
Yeah.
You I didn't say that at all. You thought it. You interpreted it.
Get me started. Yeah. That's
So
another topic there, but yeah, go ahead.
Just addressing, I think if you fix the money, I think you fix a lot of these issues. It's not like a cure-all, not going to fix everything, but I think a lot of the social issues is because, people are, and when things are bothering people, it's really hard to figure out what it is. Right? Like, I'll share a story about my mom. Like, she doesn't speak English very well. She's been here for a minute. So life was kind of difficult for her because like to talk to people, especially cutting hair, right?
Yeah.
You're cutting hair, you got to socialize, and it's difficult. It's a hard process for her. So, throughout life, she kind of carried that in with her. Right. And it came out that the angst that she carried with her came out at random times. Maybe it was because I didn't take out the trash, and she used that to like, I'm like, this is an overreaction to trash not being taken out.
Yeah.
But you see in life right now, maybe there's a lot of overreactions. There's a lot of like the anger maybe isn't about the situation, but it's coming out because of the situation.
No, you're right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. When you're poor and you have a lot of problems, you make a lot of problems, right? Not always, I'm not saying, hey, poor people are bad people. I mean, I am poor people.
Yeah.
That's me, but you're right. That's what leads to sometimes, people not being able to handle all their stress and maybe they turn to substance abuse. That leads to, crime sometimes, right? Because, hey, they're like, hey, well, I don't have what I need. I'm going to take it somehow. Right.
Yeah.
And then maybe sometimes, things like domestic abuse where it's like, I'm not happy, you're not happy, it can lead to a lot of things. So yeah, we need to find a way to definitely, minimize those things.
Yeah. And poverty isn't just a poor people problem. It's an everybody problem because you'll be on that subway, man. And what's the odds of everybody being middle class and above there? Probably low. You're going to be interacting with people who are misfortunate. And if everybody's happy, that interaction is going to be good, generally.
Oh, I mean, we see, Yang 2020 there. Maybe we gotta vote Lam, 2024, 2028, something like that. Right.
2040.
Yeah, maybe that, right? Maybe 2040, yeah. I forgot there. You had to be a certain age there, right? You got to be 35. Well, you'll be 35 soon. Huh.
Yeah, it's around the corner.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, I misspoke earlier, Bao. I said this is your second time on the podcast. I forgot about one appearance. This is your third time. You were on the singles panel as well.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That one was a lot of fun too, man.
I didn't do too much talking there, but yeah, I do remember that now.
Yeah.
I did a lot of talking the one before that. Nice.
Well, yeah, now you're a podcast veteran here.
Feels good. I'm in the right place.
Yeah, man. Yeah, anything else you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I just wanted to let your audience know that, I've been working on a passion project, which is one of the premier ways, I think, to get the word out, is to, join podcasts and have discussion on it. And yeah, this is my first time really publicly talking about these issues. And I feel like maybe over a period of time, I'll be like less scattered and more focused, more direct. And I'm hoping to be able to share my ideas and maybe have a proof of concept for you in the future. Maybe come back again and like show you like, hey, this is what I've been working on. We talked about it last time for, last 2 years ago or something like that. And yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some ideas. And yeah, I'm passionate about this stuff. Let's kick poverty's ass.
Yeah. Well, you say, you're just kind of starting out there, but hey, this is the first pancake, man.
Yes.
It might be a little burnt, but it's fucking delicious. I'm not throwing it out, right? Pour some syrup on that some bitch, right? We'll be all right.
There we go.
But yeah, man, you want to throw any social media out there or anything like that?
Sure. You can follow my Twitter at Social Adaption.
Cool. All right. I was going to say, or leave me alone, social media. I don't want to hear it. If it's not my space, it's not happening.
That's right.
All right. But yeah, man, always a pleasure. Love having you on. You're educating me on these things. So, I enjoy it. But definitely appreciate it. And for everybody listening at home, I appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck you and good night. Subscribe to the Ignorance is Strength podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.